You were insulted. You felt that sudden heat rising in your chest, the frantic heartbeat of a cornered animal, and the desperate urge to snap back, to shout, or to defend your wounded pride. But instead, you stuttered. You searched for the right words and found only ash. Or worse, you swallowed your tongue because you were afraid of the fallout. To the world, you are a nice guy, a polite citizen, a team player. But in the eyes of a predator, you are nothing more than a meal. The common man is a slave to his reactions. He is a puppet whose strings are pulled by anyone with a loud mouth and a lack of manners. The sovereign man, however, does not react. He calculates. Thomas Shelby does not raise his voice to prove his point. He does not need to. He breaks the strongest of men with the sheer, crushing weight of his presence alone. He is the architect of his own atmosphere. By the end of this transmission, you will no longer be the victim of social friction. You will possess the Shelby Protocol, a systematic method to dismantle disrespect and shatter an opponent's confidence without uttering a single syllable. You will learn to become the ghost in the room, the one whose silence is more terrifying than any scream, the one everyone fears to offend because they cannot predict your strike. What Thomas Shelby executes in the grime and smoke of 20th century Birmingham, Niccolò Machiavelli codified in the ruthless courts of 16th century Italy. Over 400 years ago, Machiavelli understood that it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Today we bridge the gap between ancient political strategy and modern psychological warfare. We are turning your vulnerability into a fortress. If you have chosen the path of the lion over the path of the sheep, prove your intent. Comment "Sovereign" right now. Like this video to seal your commitment to the garrison. Your transformation into a man of power begins now. In the hierarchy of the Peaky Blinders, silence is not the absence of sound, it is the presence of a threat. To the untrained eye, silence looks like passivity. To Thomas Shelby, it is the ultimate tool of psychological siege. When someone attempts to disrespect you, they are offering a challenge. They expect a reaction, anger, defense, or submission. By refusing to provide any of these, you create a vacuum of silence. This vacuum is a void that the offender's own insecurity will desperately try to fill. They will speak more, they will stumble over their words, and eventually, they will reveal the very weaknesses you need to destroy them. This strategy is the living embodiment of the Machiavellian fox. Niccolò Machiavelli taught that the lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves. When you remain silent in the face of an insult, you are the fox. You are unreadable. You are invisible. The opponent cannot trap you because they do not know where your boundaries lie. By the time you choose to strike, you have already seen every card in their hand. Think back to the dimly lit interior of the garrison, where the air is thick with the smell of stale gin and tobacco. Two IRA members enter, their faces etched with the arrogance of men who believe they hold the power of life and death. They shout, they threaten Tommy's family, they insult his business, and they demand his cooperation with a violence that would make any common man tremble or lash out in a panic. But look at Thomas Shelby. He does not stand up. He does not shout back. He doesn't even look at them initially. He focuses entirely on the ritual of pouring a cup of tea. The rattle of the spoon against the porcelain is the only sound in the room. This is the dead air tactic used to perfection. By prioritizing a mundane task over their life-threatening presence, Tommy communicates one devastating message. You are irrelevant. Your threats do not even register as a secondary concern. The IRA men begin to fidget. They look at each other. Their power begins to leak out of the room because Tommy refuses to acknowledge it. He waits until the silence becomes physically painful for them before he finally speaks. He has already won the interaction before the first word of business is even discussed. To master this vacuum of silence in your own life, you must implement 3 specific psychological anchors. First, the 5-second rule of delayed response. When someone says something meant to diminish you, do not answer immediately. Count to 5 in your head while maintaining a calm, neutral expression. This delay shifts the power dynamic from the speaker to the listener. It signals that you are evaluating them, rather than reacting to them. Second, Utilize the dead air tactic. If an opponent says something particularly stupid or offensive, simply stop talking. Let the silence hang there like a weight. Most people are terrified of social awkwardness and will begin to over-explain themselves or retract their statements just to break the tension. You are forcing them to do the emotional labor of the conversation. Finally, use your breathing as an anchor of dominance. Shallow, rapid breathing is a biological signal of fear. Thomas Shelby breathes with a slow, rhythmic consistency, regardless of the danger. By controlling your breath, you signal to your own nervous system and to the person in front of you that you are the sovereign of the situation. The common man is a slave to his ego. When he is disrespected, his ego demands an immediate comeback to prove his worth to the onlookers. He babbles, he gets red in the face, and he looks like a child throwing a tantrum. In contrast, the man of power understands that his worth is not up for debate. He uses silence to let the opponent's ego hang itself. If you are in a boardroom and a colleague tries to undermine your authority, do not argue. Stop. Look at them with a cold analytical gaze for several seconds, and then ask a completely unrelated question about the project. You have just signaled that their attempt at disrespect was so small, it didn't even warrant a defense. To apply this today, you must practice vulnerability neutralization. The next time you are interrupted in a meeting or a social setting, do not try to talk over the other person. Stop talking immediately. Lean back slightly. Look them directly in the eye and wait. When they finish, wait 3 more seconds. The room will go quiet. The focus will shift entirely to you. Only then, speak in a lower, slower tone than usual. You are not just regaining the floor, you are reclaiming your sovereignty. You are showing them that you are the one who decides when the silence ends. In the world of the Peaky Blinders, the loudest man in the room is the one with the most to lose. The silent man is the one who already owns the building. Be the silent man. Be the Shelby. The eyes are not mere biological instruments for sight. They are the primary weapons of psychological assessment and the most direct conduit for the projection of sovereign will. In the brutal social hierarchy of the Shelby Empire, to look away is to formally sign a confession of submission. To stare with heat or anger is to reveal the emotional volatility of a child who has lost control of his internal state. But to stare with a calculated, freezing coldness is to declare yourself a king. When you master the predatory gaze, you are no longer just looking at a man. You are auditing his soul, searching for the structural flaws in his character that will eventually allow you to dismantle him. Thomas Shelby understands that the first person to break eye contact is the person who has subconsciously accepted their secondary status in the room. This is the visceral manifestation of the Machiavellian principle that men are more influenced by what they see than by what they feel. Machiavelli famously wrote, "Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, because it belongs to everybody to see you, to few to come into touch with you." If you project the visual architecture of a master, the world, lacking the depth to see further, will assume you are one. A steady, unblinking gaze projects a state of profound internal order. To an opponent whose mind is a chaotic swirl of insecurity and doubt, your visual stillness is the most terrifying thing they have ever encountered. It suggests that you are not afraid of what they might do, because you have already seen how it ends. Nowhere is this more evident than in the chilling confrontation between Thomas Shelby and Luca Changretta. When the Italian mobster enters Tommy's office, he does so with the theatrical flair of a man who believes he has already won. He leans over Tommy's desk, invades his personal space, and takes his matches. A blatant, calculated act of disrespect designed to trigger a defensive reaction. A common man would have stood up. A common man would have reached for his weapon or demanded the matches back, but Tommy remains seated. His body is a statue, but his eyes are twin barrels of a loaded shotgun. He does not look at the matches. He does not look at Luca's hands. He looks directly through Luca, piercing the veil of the mobster's performance. By maintaining this predatory gaze, Tommy strips Luca of his power. He makes the theatrical gestures look pathetic and desperate. The message is clear. You can take my matches, but you cannot take my composure. You are a guest in a room governed by my rules, and my eyes are the judges of your eventual demise. To weaponize your gaze like a Shelby, you must first master the third eye focus. When engaged in a high-stakes confrontation, do not let your eyes wander between the opponent's left and right eye. This creates a subtle visual flickering that betrays nervousness. Instead, fix your gaze with absolute intensity on the bridge of their nose right between the eyes. To the opponent, this creates the illusion of a piercing, all-seeing stare that is physically uncomfortable to endure. It feels as though you are looking into the back of their skull. Second, you must systematically eliminate the blink reflex. In nature, the predator blinks far less than the prey. When you are being disrespected or challenged, force yourself to hold your gaze without blinking for as long as humanly possible. This biological anomaly signals to the other person's lizard brain that you are a high-level threat, a being that does not need to moisten its eyes because it is focused entirely on the kill. Furthermore, you must adopt the predatory squint over the wide-eyed stare of the amateur. A wide-eyed expression is a sign of surprise or fear. It is the face of the prey trying to take in as much information as possible to find an escape route. The squint, however, is the focus of the sniper. It narrows the field of vision to the target. It signals deep calculation and a lack of intimidation. When combined with the third eye focus, the predatory squint becomes a tool of profound psychological pressure. The common man looks down at his shoes or his phone to avoid the friction of conflict. He seeks an exit because the heat of a direct gaze is too much for his fragile ego to bear. The Shelby man, however, looks through the conflict. He embraces the friction. He understands that the gaze is the first line of the battlefield. In your modern life, whether you are sitting across from a manipulative boss, a disrespectful client, or a social rival, your eyes must remain fixed. Do not look at their hands if they gesture wildly. Do not look at the door. Do not look at your watch. Today, make it your mission to maintain eye contact until the other person breaks it first in every single interaction. If they keep talking, let them. Just watch the movement of their mouth and the bridge of their nose with the cold curiosity of an entomologist studying an insect. This is not about being alpha. It is about being sovereign. It is about proving that your internal world is so stable that nothing they say or do can force you to flinch. You are the architect of the gaze. You are the one who decides when the inspection is over. Physical sovereignty is the art of absolute stillness. In the theater of power, movement is a leak. Every time you fidget, every time you shift your weight, and every time you touch your face, you are hemorrhaging authority. Thomas Shelby moves with a deliberate, haunting economy of motion. He understands a fundamental truth of the underworld. A man who cannot control the twitching of his own fingers can never hope to control the complex machinery of a city. Power is static. It is the mountain that does not move regardless of how hard the wind blows. Chaos, on the other hand, is constant, purposeless movement. When you are disrespected, your greatest weapon is not a clenched fist, but a body that refuses to react. This mirrors the strategic caution of Machiavelli, who warned that a prince must avoid everything that could make him appear effeminate, frivolous, or irresolute. To Machiavelli, the perception of stability was as important as stability itself. A leader who is seen constantly adjusting himself, looking over his shoulder, or moving with frantic energy signals to his enemies that his mind is in a state of turmoil. If your mind is in turmoil, you are vulnerable to a coup. Total physical stillness, however, suggests a mind that has already processed every variable and has already secured the victory. It is the posture of a man who is waiting for the rest of the world to catch up to his reality. Observe Thomas Shelby in the halls of the House of Commons. He is surrounded by men who have spent their lives practicing the art of rhetoric, men who shout, wave papers, and use grand, sweeping gestures to hide the emptiness of their souls. In the midst of this cacophony, Tommy sits like a monument of cold marble. His hands are folded or resting perfectly still on his lap. He does not nod along to show he is listening. He does not tilt his head in a display of polite interest. He is the gravitational center of the room precisely because he is the only thing that is not moving. His stillness forces everyone else to orbit him. They look to him to see if he is reacting, and when he gives them nothing, their anxiety grows. They begin to speak faster, to overcompensate, and eventually to make mistakes. Tommy doesn't have to defeat them. He simply has to remain still until they defeat themselves. To achieve this level of physical sovereignty, you must first master the anchor pose. This begins with your feet. Most men stand with their weight shifting from one leg to the other, a subconscious signal of a desire to flee. You must ground yourself. Plant your feet firmly, shoulder-width apart, and imagine they are rooted into the bedrock of the earth. Whether you are standing or sitting, your lower body must be an unshakable foundation. Second, you must engage in the systematic elimination of low-status micro-movements. These are the tiny, often unnoticed actions: adjusting your tie, rubbing your neck, touching your watch, or picking at your fingernails. In the language of the body, these are self-soothing gestures. They tell the world that you are nervous and are trying to comfort yourself. A Shelby does not need comfort because he is the source of the discomfort in the room. The final component of this protocol is the 20% tempo reduction. In a state of high stress, the human body naturally speeds up. We talk faster, we walk faster, and we move our hands with a jittery frequency. To break an opponent's disrespect, you must manually override this biological urge. Whatever your natural speed of movement is, reduce it by 20%. When you reach for a glass of water, do it slowly. When you turn your head to look at someone, do it with a deliberate, heavy grace. This slow tempo communicates that you have an abundance of time, and time is the ultimate luxury of the powerful. The man who rushes is a servant to the clock. The man who moves slowly is the master of the moment. The common man is a bag of nerves and habit. He adjusts his collar when he feels criticized. He taps his foot when he feels ignored. He is a walking broadcast of his own insecurities. The Shelby man, however, becomes the mountain. He understands that stillness is a form of psychological suffocating. When you sit in total silence and total stillness while someone is trying to provoke you, you are essentially removing the oxygen from their fire. They have nothing to feed on. They expect a spark, and you give them cold stone. Practice this today in a controlled environment. Sit in a chair for 10 minutes, and do not move a single muscle, except for the necessary rise and fall of your chest as you breathe. Do not scratch the itch on your nose. Do not adjust your posture. Master the vessel that holds your spirit. When you enter a high-pressure situation, remember, the more you move, the less power you have. The less you move, the more terrifying you become. In the world of the Peaky Blinders, the man who sits the stillest is usually the one who is holding the knife under the table. Reclaim your physical sovereignty. Become the statue that watches the world burn and then rebuilds it in his own image. Gemini said, "Information is the ghost in the machine of power. To the common man, a secret is a burden, something to be whispered in ears to gain a fleeting moment of social relevance. To Thomas Shelby, information is a blade that is never drawn until the very moment it is destined to draw blood." In the architecture of sovereign power, the most dangerous thing you can possess is not a weapon, but the knowledge of your enemy's vulnerability, and the discipline to keep that knowledge hidden in the shadows. When you are disrespected, your instinct is to retaliate with what you know, to prove your superiority through a verbal display of intellect. This is a fatal error. By revealing what you know too soon, you lose your leverage. You give the enemy a chance to prepare, to pivot, and to build a defense. The Shelby way is to let the threat of what you might know loom over the offender like a dark cloud. You keep the blade at their throat, but you keep it invisible. You don't just want to win the argument, you want to own the soul of the person who dared to cross you. This strategic restraint is the essence of Machiavellian sovereignty. In The Prince, Machiavelli advised that a prudent ruler ought not to keep faith when by so doing it would be against his interest, and when the reasons which made him bind himself actually no longer exist. While this is often interpreted as simple treachery, its deeper meaning is the absolute control of one's own narrative and resources. A sovereign man does not owe the truth to those who seek to undermine him. Secrecy is the ultimate leverage because it creates an environment of permanent uncertainty for the enemy. If they do not know the extent of your reach, they cannot map the boundaries of their own safety. By withholding information, you force the opponent to imagine the worst possible scenario, and in the theater of the mind, the imagination is always more terrifying than reality. Consider the intricate psychological dance between Thomas Shelby and the Russian Duchess, Tatiana Petrovna. Tatiana is a predator of a different breed, decadent, unpredictable, and highly skilled in the art of mental destabilization. She enters Tommy's world attempting to play games with his sanity, using her sexuality and her aristocratic status to make him feel like a common gangster. Most men in Tommy's position would have tried to impress her, or perhaps tried to intimidate her with brute force. Instead, Tommy maintains a bored, almost clinical detachment. He has done his homework. He knows the secrets of the Petrovna family, the internal betrayals, the hidden jewels, and the desperate financial state of their exiled empire. But he doesn't use this knowledge to shout her down. He drops hints of his knowledge like single drops of poison into a well. He reveals just enough to let her know that he owns her future, while his face remains an unreadable mask of cold indifference. He lets her see the handle of the blade, but he never shows the edge. By the time their interaction reaches its peak, Tatiana's arrogance has been replaced by a frantic, nervous energy. She realizes she is not playing with a man. She is being processed by a machine. To apply this weaponization of information in the modern social chess match, you must first master the half-smile of hidden knowledge. When someone attempts to disrespect you or gatekeep information to make themselves feel important, do not challenge them. Instead, look at them with a slight, almost imperceptible tilt of the head and a faint smile, the kind of smile one gives to a child who is trying to tell a lie. This smile communicates that you already know what they are trying to hide, and that their little power play is amusing to you. Second, you must master the art of the cryptic question. Instead of making a statement to defend yourself, ask a question that implies you know more than you are letting on. If a colleague tries to undermine your work, ask, "Are you sure this is the specific angle you want to take, given what happened in the third quarter?" You don't need to specify what happened. The vague reference will trigger their own internal anxieties, making them backtrack to avoid a potential trap. Finally, you must learn the value of strategic vulnerability. Occasionally, feign ignorance or weakness on a minor point to bait the enemy into an overreach. Let them think they have found a gap in your armor, only to reveal that you are leading them into a killing zone of your own design. The common man is a loud, open book. He brags about his connections, his plans, and his insights because he craves the immediate hit of validation. He is predictable, and because he is predictable, he is easily managed. The Shelby man, however, lets his results do the talking. He understands that in any interaction, the person who speaks the most is providing the most intelligence to their opponent. To be sovereign is to be a closed vault. People should walk away from a conversation with you feeling like they gave away too much and learned too little. Today, when someone asks for your opinion or your inside track on a situation, give them a one-word answer. A simple perhaps or eventually, followed by a steady gaze, is more powerful than a 10-minute explanation. Let them wonder. Let them worry. Let them realize that your silence is not a lack of knowledge, but a choice of power. The final act of any confrontation is not the victory itself, but the departure. In the world of Thomas Shelby, the person who leaves the room first is the person who defines the value of the meeting. Disrespect is almost always a trap, a lure designed to pull you into a cycle of reaction, emotion, and defensive justification. The offender wants your attention. They want to see you struggle to regain your footing. By choosing the exact moment of your exit, you break the cycle and leave the opponent standing in the vacuum of their own malice. When you walk away on your own terms, you communicate that the other person's presence is no longer worth your time. You are not running away. You are withdrawing your attention, which is the most valuable currency you possess. An exit is a statement of ultimate sovereignty. This aligns perfectly with Machiavelli's counsel on the independence of the prince. He noted that a prince should always take counsel, but only when he wishes, not when others wish. This principle extends to every social interaction. You must be the one who dictates the duration of the engagement. If you allow a disrespectful person to keep you in a conversation, you are implicitly accepting their authority over your time. By leaving, you reclaim that authority. You show that you are not a participant in their drama, but a judge who has decided the proceedings are over. To walk away is to leave the other person with the last word. But in the hierarchy of power, the last word is usually a desperate attempt to regain a relevance that has already been lost. Think of the high-tension negotiation between Thomas Shelby and the chaotic genius Alfie Solomons in his salt-aired warehouse. The room is a powder keg of mutual distrust and hidden agendas. Alfie is a master of verbal distraction, a man who uses a storm of words and violent outbursts to keep his opponents off balance. He threatens Tommy, he mocks him, and he attempts to draw him into a shouting match over the price of grenades and the loyalty of men. But watch Tommy's exit. After the business is concluded, and after he has made it clear that he holds the detonator to Alfie's entire operation, Tommy doesn't stick around to trade insults. He doesn't wait for Alfie to finish his colorful monologue. He says what is necessary, he delivers the cold reality of the situation, and then he turns his back. This is the ultimate sign of contempt in the Shelby playbook. By turning his back and walking toward the door while Alfie is still speaking, Tommy signals that Alfie's threats have zero weight. He walks out with a steady, rhythmic pace, never looking back, leaving Alfie to scream at the shadows. The exit was the final blow that shattered Alfie's leverage. To execute a strategic exit that breaks an opponent's confidence, you must master the turn and burn. This involves ending the interaction immediately after you have made your most powerful or decisive point. Do not wait for a response. Do not look for a reaction. Deliver your statement, and then immediately shift your physical focus to the exit. This prevents the other person from recovering their status by getting the last word or making a joke at your expense. Second, you must adopt the Shelby pace. When you leave a room, especially one where there is tension, do not rush. Rushing is a sign of escape, a biological indicator that you are afraid of what is behind you. Conversely, do not linger or dawdle, which shows a need for approval. Walk with a slow, heavy, and purposeful stride. Imagine that your boots are making a sound that vibrates through the floorboards. You are not leaving because you have to. You are leaving because you have finished. The final element is the final word protocol. Before you depart, deliver one short, cold statement that summarizes your position. It should not be an insult, but a fact. The terms are on the table. You have until dawn, or simply, I've heard enough. This sets the boundary. The common man stays to argue his point until he is blue in the face, hoping to win the interaction through persistence. He often ends up looking desperate and needy. The Shelby man dictates the terms and then disappears like a ghost. He understands that his absence is often more influential than his presence. When you are gone, the other person is forced to sit with the weight of your words and the coldness of your departure. They are left alone with their insecurity, wondering if they pushed you too far and what the consequences will be. Today, practice the art of the early departure. In your next social gathering or professional meeting, identify the moment when the most important information has been exchanged, and then leave 2 minutes before the natural conclusion. Reclaim your time. If someone is being disrespectful or wasting your breath, do not wait for a polite opening to leave. State your piece, turn your body, and walk away. You are the sovereign of your own schedule. You are the one who decides when the curtain falls. By leaving the room on your own terms, you leave the disrespect behind you, and you walk forward into the next phase of your reign. The world belongs to those who know when to stay, but more importantly, to those who know exactly when to leave. Forgiveness is a luxury reserved for those who do not have empires to build. In the ruthless expansion of the Shelby lineage, an insult is not an emotional wound to be healed. It is a debt that must be collected with compound interest. When someone disrespects you, the common man's instinct is to strike back immediately, to trade insults, or to let his anger flare up in a display of wasted energy. This is a fatal strategic error. A reaction is a gift you give to your enemy. It tells them exactly where you are vulnerable and how much power they have over your peace of mind. Thomas Shelby does not seek comebacks. He seeks the permanent removal of the threat. He understands that justice, much like a fine whiskey, is best served only after it has aged in the darkness of a patient mind. If you react today, you are a slave to the moment. If you calculate for tomorrow, you are the master of the endgame. This is the cold application of Machiavelli's most brutal decree. Injuries should be done all at once, so that being tasted less, they offend less. Benefits should be given little by little, so that they may be tasted more. Machiavelli knew that if you must strike an enemy, you must do it with such overwhelming systematic force that they are rendered incapable of ever seeking revenge. A small slap invites a counterattack. A total dismantling of their life, their reputation, and their resources ensures their permanent silence. By delaying your retribution, you allow the enemy to lower their guard, to become arrogant, and to expose the jugular of their operation. You are not forgetting the disrespect. You are simply waiting for the moment when your strike will be absolute and final. The most profound example of this long-game retribution is Thomas Shelby's multi-year psychological and political war against Inspector Campbell. For years, Campbell was the primary source of disrespect, humiliation, and physical threat to the Shelby family. He treated Tommy like a common street rat, insulted his heritage, and threatened the people he loved. A lesser man would have killed Campbell in a blind alley during the first week. But Tommy endured. He watched, he listened, and he allowed Campbell to believe he was the one in control. He even worked alongside the man, maintaining a mask of professional compliance while he quietly mapped every one of Campbell's sins, every one of his hypocrisies, and every one of his weaknesses. The final retribution did not happen in a heat of passion. It happened at the Epsom Derby, amidst the chaos of the crowd, where the red right hand finally closed around Campbell's throat. It was a destruction years in the making, calculated, cold, and utterly irreversible. Tommy didn't just kill the man. He erased his legacy and proved once and for all who the true sovereign of England's underbelly was. To implement the long-game retribution in your modern social zadres, you must first cultivate emotional detachment. When you are disrespected, you must train your mind to view the offender not as a person, but as a problem to be solved or an obstacle to be bypassed. If you feel anger, you have lost. You must remain as cold as the winter air in Birmingham. This detachment allows you to see the situation with tactical clarity. Second, you must begin the construction of your leverage folders. In your professional or social life, start keeping a mental or discrete physical record of the habits, weaknesses, and connections of those who seek to undermine you. Knowledge is the raw material of power. You don't use it today. You save it for the day when they stand in your way of a promotion, a deal, or a critical social move. The third pillar of this strategy is the success as revenge mindset. The ultimate way Thomas Shelby breaks those who disrespect him is by rising so high that their very existence becomes a rounding error in his ledgers. When you focus your energy on building your wealth, your status, and your physical presence, you are engaging in a form of passive destruction. There is no greater psychological blow to an enemy than to see the man they tried to diminish standing on a mountain they can never climb. The common man seeks revenge because he wants to pull the other person down to his level. The Shelby man seeks sovereignty because he wants to make the other person's level irrelevant. He turns the disrespect into fuel for his own ascension. In your current environment, perhaps a workplace where a superior talks down to you or a social circle where your value is questioned, do not engage in the dirt. Do not explain your worth. Instead, become a ghost. Work in the shadows. Build a network, acquire a new skill, or launch a project that will eventually grant you the power to walk away or to command their compliance. Today, identify one person who has consistently shown you disrespect. Instead of plotting a verbal zinger, write down one significant career or personal milestone that, once achieved, would make their opinion of you utterly powerless. That is your target. That is your derby. While they are busy talking about you, you are busy becoming someone they can no longer touch. In the philosophy of the Peaky Blinders, the best way to break a man is to let him watch your rise from the dirt he tried to bury you in. Power is not a loud, boisterous thing. It does not need to shout to be heard, and it does not need to explain itself to be understood. Power is the silence of the storm before it breaks the trees. Throughout this journey, you have learned the Shelby Protocol, the architecture of a sovereign mind. You have learned that silence is a vacuum that sucks the confidence out of your enemies. You have learned that your gaze is a weapon of assessment that can strip a man of his theatrical pride. You have learned that stillness is the physical manifestation of internal order, and that information is a blade held in the shadows. You have learned that the moment you leave a room defines the terms of your engagement, and that retribution is a long game played only by those with the discipline to wait. Thomas Shelby is not merely a man. He is a manifestation of the Machiavellian ideal adapted for the modern world. He is the prince who understands that respect is not a gift freely given by the masses. It is a tax you collect through the unwavering strength of your character and the coldness of your strategy. The common man will continue to react, to shout, to fidget, and to complain about the unfairness of the world. He will remain a pawn in a game he doesn't even realize is being played. But you have chosen a different path. You have chosen the path of the lion and the fox. You have chosen to be the one who defines the atmosphere rather than the one who is affected by it. I leave you with a final challenge, a 24-hour protocol of absolute sovereignty. For the next 24 hours, you are forbidden from complaining about any circumstance, no matter how frustrating. You are forbidden from explaining your actions or your motives to anyone who does not have a direct need to know. You will walk 20% slower. You will speak only when necessary, and you will maintain eye contact until the other person breaks it. You will observe the world around you with the cold analytical curiosity of a man who is measuring the room for new furniture. This is not a drill. It is a reclamation of your spirit. The world is full of loud, weak men who are terrified of the dark. Be the reason they are afraid. Be the quiet force that everyone notices, but no one dares to disrupt. The Peaky Blinders do not beg for a seat at the table. They own the building, the table, and the air that the others breathe. Carry yourself with the weight of Birmingham behind you, and the wisdom of Machiavelli within you. Go forth and command the room before you even utter a single word. Your reign does not begin tomorrow. It begins the moment you close this transmission and look at the world with new, colder eyes.